Hello students, today we're going to pursue our topic of what contributes to elite athletic success. I really enjoyed reading your reflections on the Erikson piece about what makes an expert. This study by Erikson is quite famous, and the 10,000 hour rule is obviously an average. But it emphasizes the importance of disciplined practice and having good coaches. So I think that there's something to be learned about that in all human pursuits, not just athletics. Certainly in the case of the two articles you read on psychology, Donahue and his colleagues were most concerned about mental preparation techniques. And so in this instance, they try 3 different mental preparation interventions. In your notes on this article, I would expect that you would have a brief discussion of the purpose of the article, that coaches obviously think that there are ways that athletes, if they were motivated more, could perform better, or if they were more confident, could perform better. And so that is the general purpose of the study. This particular study, you didn't have a list of hypotheses, but you have this general research question, and that should be the beginning of your reflection to make sure you are clear on what was the author's purpose. Then you want to identify what is the study that they conduct, and here you'd want to identify what are the 3 types of interventions. So the first one is to make motivating statements. The second one is to make statements that remind them of behavioral technique issues that will allow them to do better in the race. And then the third intervention was to ask them questions that they would need to answer, and that these were maybe attempts to get them distracted from their more typical lack of confidence going into a race. In the end, though, what you're really going to try to do then is say, okay, here's the study, but what are the findings? That's what I want you to focus on most clearly. And here, there were a number of interesting findings. One, that the behavioral motivator was the most effective, that they liked the questions least, and that the question asking was not typically the most effective for an athlete. The athletes also identified that they didn't like the questions being asked with 5 minutes left to go before the race started. They would have rather had them in the last 2.5 minutes prior to the race. But mainly I think the fact that athletes don't necessarily like the motivating strategy that in the end was the most effective is probably the most significant attribute of this article. So in the discussion, one of the things they also noted was that you can't really probably rely on athletes using self-talk and self-motivating as the best strategy. So, turning then to Hutchinson, the second article I asked you to read had to deal with elite athletes' ability to have increased tolerance of pain. And I think that this is true of a lot of the elite athletes that I've known. They took great pride in being able to put in very high quality training sessions, that they were willing to endure the pain even in the training session. And certainly the Prefontaine film that you watched, and I hope you enjoyed, most think that Prefontaine's excellence was in many ways based on his commitment to running hard every time and to be able to endure more pain than the rest of the competitors. So those are the 2 articles that I had you read on psychology. I have enjoyed reading the things that you've submitted about how athletes are reacting to the postponement of the games and the coronavirus in general. You know, it must be an absolute roller coaster for these athletes. It's a roller coaster for all of us, but this is something they've worked for all their life. And so I would like us now to turn our attention to the physiological attributes that contribute to athletic success. Please send me your questions so that I can respond to any questions you have related to the psychological approach.